The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts, Debi and Sam.
Today's topic is to Vietnam and back. So we have with us John Hansen. Thank you for being here with us. We're going to get into who you are and what you've had. So Sam and I were saying we feel like you've led about 10 lives with all the stuff that you've done and experienced in different arenas. Does that sound accurate?
Probably more than 2.
Well, I said 10. But yeah. I think you've led a number of lives. So you got Cat's Beat, right? With the 9 lives, you've led quite a few. We were looking at all the stuff that you've done. We're not going to be able to get into all of that today because it could fill hours worth of information. But we're going to do some highlights today on some of the interesting things that you've seen and experienced. So we thank you for being here with us today.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's get started with when did you serve and in what branch of the military?
I was in the Navy. I volunteered for 4 years. I could have done for 3 years. I was trying to get the attention of the recruiter, who was an old Navy chief with his khaki uniform, smoking a stogie at his desk, typing on a typewriter. And he just looked, without looking at me, he said, 3 years or 4? I was trying to get his attention, so I said, I'll go 4. So I did 4. You hand me the papers, I signed up. So I went in, and I was 19, and I tried college, and it wasn't for me at the time, and I was pretty wild. And so we had 12-week boot camp, and that I understand that looking back at that time, when we sign the dotted line to go into the service, in effect, we're giving the government a blank check on our lives. Mm-hmm. And so what they do, and the pattern is, regardless of the branch of service, for the first few weeks, they break you down, and the discipline is harsh. They inconvenience you any way they can. And if one guy screws up in your company, everybody pays for it. You don't do anything by yourself. You don't go anywhere on base by yourself. You're always with a unit. And the discipline is extremely, at least when I was in, discipline is very severe. After the boot, then they build you back up after about 6 weeks of a 12-week boot camp. And when you come out, you're a changed person, whether it's, I'm using it gender neutral because women go through these same thing. Mm-hmm. So you come out, and there's usually a 2-week leave where you go home. I went home. And I looked up, I thought I was going to reconnect with this girl I was engaged to, and she'd gotten engaged we were engaged, but she'd gotten a job at Boeing, and that was all changed. She was kind of partying with them and stuff, and it was kind of game over. So I went back, and I was disappointed at my assignment. It was a World War II vintage ship that my dad and my uncle could have served on it, and it was not one of these sleek
new
assault ships, with guns bristling everywhere and that kind of stuff, which is what I thought I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. It was like a floating pickup truck. It had a tailgate in the back, and the bed, what would be the equivalent of the bed, could be flooded with water, so we could bring in small craft. We had cranes on either side where we could bring in. So we were basically transport for expeditionary forces like the Marine Corps, which was part of the Navy, or underwater demolition team. The SEALs were a new thing then, and they were attached to the CIA, so we heard about them, but we never saw them.
And this was during the Vietnam War.
During Vietnam War, 1966 is when I went in, and by early 67, we were there, and the picture I sent you is that was.
So I know a lot of people were drafted in that time because I know people who were drafted, but you signed up. You wanted to be part of the.
I was too proud to be drafted. So.
All right, and then you served your 4 years and came back. Yep.
And when you came back from serving, what made you want to stay in law enforcement?
God's hand was on me while I was over there. And first of all, I got rotated into, from the first cruise, I was on the deck force. I was just a deck hand and basically a bosun's mate. And we did a lot of the shipboard maintenance and that sort of thing. Seamanship is what we mastered in. And I got rotated in. I applied to get into the gunnery division, and I was accepted. And then when I turned 21 and I was third-class petty officer, then I was able to go to, when we pulled into port, when my section of the crew had to stay on the ship and the rest of the crew could go ashore, I was sent to report to the shore patrol detachment at the base wherever we were. And so my first one, we were in the Philippines. It was our home base. I had to report to the base there. They had all these guys lined up, the permanent shore patrol. They had all of us lined up against the wall. I got picked, I think, because of my build. And so I was to ride in the paddy wagon with the main shore patrol guy. And everybody else got to walk a two-man foot beat in Olongapo City across the base, across the river from the base. It was nothing but bars and brothels, 2 stories high, for about 2 or 3 blocks. And so we just rode up and down the street, and we'd stop when some Filipino guy would come out of a bar and wave his arms at us and fight inside. So we go in there and break it up and throw the drunken Marines and drunken sailors into the paddy wagon. We'd fill it up until when it got full, then we'd take them to the base and kick them out. No paperwork or no nothing. They were put into the brig. We go back. We did that all night long. And I thought, this is for me. This is what I want to do. The very next morning, we put out to sea, and a couple of the guys that were on my ship that I had arrested, they got into my face. We were standing in the chow line, and I said, look, you did what you did. I was doing what I had to do. If you don't like it, the well deck is empty. We can go down there and settle it there. Oh, no, it's all right. It was over. Fights were settled when the well deck was empty. That's where we went to duke it out. So, and then so I did shore patrol in a couple of places in Japan. I can't remember. Yokohama, I think, was one of them. But and then when we came back to the States for a few months, and I did shore patrol. I walked a foot beat in downtown San Diego with a partner. I got to know San Diego cops. I also worked on the border with Tijuana down there to pick up deserters coming through or guys that were AWOL.
Like draft dodgers or people
Well,
that
there were military guys that were
AWOL. Okay.
Yeah, they were just gone AWOL, and so that got kind of testy at time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I saw one incident where it didn't involve me, but there was a guy in a convertible, American guy in a convertible coming back through, and
from Mexico.
From Mexico, from Tijuana, and he's very nervous as his customs guy was rummaging around in his car, and he reached down into a pocket in the back seat of this convertible, and the guy panicked. He put his car in rear and drove, and he's dragging this customs guy down the road, and a motorcycle cop from San Diego pulled up alongside the guy and shot him in the head, in the car, the driver in the head, and the car put her off to the side. I thought, my eyes were like this.
Like my eyes right now.
This kind of stuff that I saw.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that was that would have been in the late 60s or early 70s or?
No, I was out in 70.
So this was after you got out or?
No, this was while I
while you were
was
still in, so it was late 60s.
Yeah, I was detailed down there to the border.
Gotcha, okay.
At least once or twice.
And then when did you move up to Washington?
My ship came up. I I was about to get out, and I wanted to join San Diego PD. I got to know some of the guys, and then they put in a 2-year college requirement to apply, and I didn't have that. So my ship was going up to Washington to be decommissioned. It was over 20 years old, and so that's where I was from. And while I was up there, I needed work. I was getting out in a couple months. So I wanted to join the Seattle Police Department. They had stopped hiring because of budget cuts. So I applied at Bellevue, which was my hometown across the lake, and they hired me. And and Seattle was trying to make their academy a regional academy. There was no training standard in Washington at that time for cops. So I went to they sent me and 11 other guys they had hired to the Seattle Police Academy. So that was 12 weeks. But for the guys that hadn't gotten military experience, that was, the discipline was tough.
Right.
I told them, so you guys don't have any idea how easy this is. I said, this is because you go home at night, and you're home on weekends, and you can quit when you want. You can't do that. I mean,
the military,
you keep your identity when you come in here. So anyway, but it was fun.
Yeah. And then you said you were a police officer there for 21 years?
21 years.
Okay.
I did a little over 10 years in patrol. It's where I got the nickname Mad Dog within the first 6 months. I was on for my aggressiveness and my tenacity and that kind of thing. So, and then I went into detectives, and I worked burglaries at first, and my first major case, and then came in a couple that had come back home to Seattle from 20 years in the Middle East working for Union Carbide. They put all their treasures from the Middle East into storage units, and they come back and it had all been stolen. And I worked that case for over a year. Wow. I got back 99% of the property from Yuma, Arizona. Wow. A Mexican mafia guy had moved up to Seattle, and he was a drug dealer. He was dealt heroin, and this married couple that were addicted. They were stealing the property for him, and he was sending it back down to Arizona. I got him on some weapons charges. We did a raid on his storage locker, and there was a full automatic machine gun in there that had the serial numbers drilled through. So I had a federal charge of him. I had him, pardon the pun, but we had him by the short hairs. So I turned him into an informant, and that led on to other cases. I wound up solving, with my partner, Bob Littlejohn, we solved, over a year's time, we solved the missing case of Gary and Lori Crabtree they were in another county, just north of Seattle. And the police up there had botched the investigation into where they were, what happened to them. And long story short, the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office from up there asked my chief if he could borrow me and my partner to solve the case because they couldn't get anybody in his county or his city to do it. So my chief said, yeah, but they have to keep their own caseloads. So we worked around the clock, but it took us about a year before we got the bodies of Gary and Lori Crabtree from the bottom of Lake Sammamish. These two guys, they got their drugs and their dope from Gary Crabtree, and they bought, the older guy, David Simmons, he bought a trailer on the shore of Lake Sammamish. He had a balloon payment coming up, and he wasn't going to be able, didn't know how he was going to pay it. But so he and his partner, they went up to the Crabtree's house on New Year's Day of 1983, and they murdered the couple. They stole all their jewelry, all their cash. They put their bodies on the trunk of their Lincoln Continental. They put their bodies in they took the Lincoln Continental to the airport and left it there to look like they went somewhere else, like they fled, because the DEA was looking at them. And then they took the bodies and took them down to where their trailer was, and they removed 6 concrete blocks from underneath their trailer put the two bodies in sleeping bags with the concrete blocks,
And sank them in
and then rode them out to the lake and dumped them in there. And then these guys took all their jewelry, all their belongings, and they went all the way down the Oregon coast, pawn shop to pawn shop,
Wow.
selling off all this, raking in all this money. And over the course of that time, I got back most of the jewelry that had been melted down. I had artists that made the jewelry give me drawings of it, and then we went down there and I showed this around, and I met guys that said, yeah, they bought this from me, or they sold this to me, and this is they signed it and stuff. Wow. So with it, we had a trial, and they were both convicted, 2 counts each of first-degree murder, and 2 counts each of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. And the older guy, David Simmons, died years ago in prison. And the other guy, Billy Daly, who liked to be called Billy the Kid, he's still there. He's still in Walla Walla Penitentiary, and that was 86 is when they were.
Wow.
Sounds like a true crime podcast episode.
I know. I was like living up to your Mad Dog name, finding all of that.
Yeah.
Truly.
I had a lot of cases that went over a year. Even in the private sector, I did. So.
Yeah.
Well, because that was the next thing, right? That you transitioned.
Yes. So, because from our previous conversation, you mentioned you didn't grow up in a Christian household, but once you accepted Jesus, how did that kind of work its way into how you did your job?
I got saved going through my second divorce. I was still in patrol, and that was in the 70s, 78. And having a daughter really rung my bell. And I knew I needed to change. I was deeply in the wrong. I was unfaithful. I was heavy-handed, on and on. And so my mom was a Christian Scientist, so she didn't believe that Jesus was God. My dad was a pagan. He didn't care one way or the other who Jesus was. And my dad I was a lot like him. I didn't want to be, except for the drinking. I was like him. I was a fight picker, and I was aggressive, and I don't know, rather obnoxious, I think. So I had been watching Billy Graham on TV. I've been watching Pat Robertson on the 700 Club. I had been kicked out of the public school system when I was in 7th grade, after 7th grade, because of my behavior. And so the only place in the school district I could go was a private Christian school. And there, for 8th and 9th grade, I heard the gospel every morning before classes started. So this is where I'm learning the gospel. That's where the seed is planted.
Right.
But it doesn't go down very far. But it was enough that when I'm going, my mom is making me go to Christian Science Church on Sundays. I'm listening to this and thinking, this is what they're saying Jesus is. This is what these people are saying who Jesus is. There's a conflict here. And so I began to ask questions at Sunday school. And one morning, after my mom picked me up to take me home, she was very angry. And she said, "You've been kicked out of church."
Oh, gosh.
I said, "Oh, what?" And she says, "Yeah." She said, "You're asking too many questions in Sunday school. It's
This is at the
disruptive,
Christian Science
and they do
Church,
not
right?
want you back." So Mom was upset with me over that and getting kicked out of the school district. Anyway, so after I was going through the second divorce, this is where I really got on my knees and I confessed my sins. I think on TV, I forget. I think it was watching the 700 Club, and then I went to a Lutheran church where I had gone there off and on, and every time I heard the worship music, I started crying, and people would give me these cold stares. What are you doing? Type of thing, So I thought this is not my place. So another friend of my mother's went to an Assemblies of God church, neighborhood church in Bellevue, and she says, "Why don't you come with me to church?" "Oh, no, I don't want to do that." I thought Pentecostal women have hairy armpits and the whole thing. That's what I thought. So, they dress funny and that kind of stuff. And so finally, I had tried a couple of other churches and nothing was working. So I told this girl, Sharon, I said, I'll go. So I went with her, and we went in the door of the church. The service has already started. Ushers opened the doors to go into the sanctuary, and the worship music was going on. And I felt like there was a hook in here and a line, and I was being reeled in. And we sat in the back, in the overflow section. There's only 2 seats left. I sat in there, and I started crying. And an usher comes over behind me, lays his hand on my shoulder, and starts praying for me. And then after the service, he said, I was praying for you, and God showed me all the things he's going to do for you. I said, what? God speaks to you? And he said, yeah. He says he does. And I said, we have the Holy Spirit. So that Sunday night, I went back for the Sunday night service, and I received the baptism of the Holy Spirit. Missionary had been a speaker, guest speaker. He'd come back from somewhere in the Middle East or Far East, I forget where. And I stayed with there after the service. I got slain in the Spirit, the whole thing. So then my patrol work began to change because even I was gentler about arresting people. And I was...
so much mad in the mad dog.
I led people to Christ where I had a chance to do it. People I had in the back seat of my patrol car, I couldn't go anywhere.
Right.
So I had a captive audience. And so I did that. And then when I was in working night shift and be real quiet at nights, I'd be praying in the Spirit as I'm cruising around looking for trouble. And so that foundation. And then when I went into detectives, I have to say that I have had an extraordinary success rate with solving cases. And I was all because I prayed over my cases at home. I prayed over them at home.
Yeah. That's so good.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Well, and something that I was thinking about after just hearing how much you've done is also just how you've been protected physically through every situation you've been in, right? Yeah, because I was like, you've never been shot. Is that right?
It's kept me well. I'm the same height and weight I was when I came out of the Navy.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
And in all of those dangerous situations, excuse me, because we're just kind of touching on some of these. We're not going to have time to go into all of that, but you were in the Vietnam War. You were a police officer. You were a private detective. You were a bounty hunter, which we didn't talk about. And you spent some time, which I think the next thing we're going to ask about is the border, some of the stuff on the border. But you said you were never shot in all of that time?
No, I was never shot or shot at.
Which is crazy when you think about how dangerous all of those situations that God really did have his hand on your life.
I made, in the Navy, when we were in Vietnam, we were on the rivers a lot by ourselves, anchored out there with staging as a staging base for the expeditionary forces, either the Marines or their underwater demolition teams, or we'd be a repair facility for shot-up Navy rivercraft, not the patrol boats. Those were made of fiberglass, so we weren't set up to do that. But the other, the barges and things like that, transport materials and stuff, we repaired that. And there was battles going on within hearing range of where we were. We were in the jungle by ourselves, anchored there, and I was on deck as either always to do with the ship's guns or the machine guns or something else, doing sentry duty. And the thought was, looks like nothing's going to happen. You're young and you're a little bit on the careless side. One night we were anchored out somewhere out in there, and we were watching a movie outdoors. We'd rig up this great, over the well deck, we could rig up this great canvas screen with an aluminum frame, and that would be our screen. We had the old-fashioned projector, so we're watching a Western movie on the thing, and it's dark everywhere. And all of a sudden, we're hearing a helicopter, woof, 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 woof. and it's coming in. We look over our shoulder, and it comes down low in the water, and it's ahead of us, so it's forward, then it goes uphill in the jungle, and it's dropping these flares, and it's very close to us. And to our surprise, all these guys in black pajamas are scrambling out from underneath the brush. They were scoping on us.
Oh my gosh.
So right after that, along comes this called Puff the Magic Dragon, and it was a helicopter gunship, and it had these had machine guns where it would cover about a football field size area. Every square foot would be a bullet, would be spaced.
Wow.
And it went up this hill, and bodies and trees went straight down, and it flew away. And you know what we did? We'd say, well, I'll be damned. We went back to watching the movie. It's just how nuts we were, young and reckless.
Yes, I know. Oh, wow.
So let's ask
That's
about the border.
that's one of your many crazy stories, but I know that you have some from your time at the border and working down there with the Arizona Associate. What was the name?
Minutemen, right?
Minutemen.
Yeah, I was with the Minutemen in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen an episode on the 700 Club where they went down there and they contacted a couple of guys that were running operations down there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm living in Arizona at this point, and being an adventure junkie, I guess, I thought I'm going to go down there and see what I can do.
Yeah.
So I went down there, and I wound up being the personal security guy, the bodyguard, and the intelligence guy for the founder of the Minutemen, Chris Simcox. And we wanted to show that President Bush had said the border can't be secured, it's too porous. So we were to prove him wrong. April 2005 was our target month. They put out a notice on the internet. They were looking for volunteers to come down. Mm-hmm. We had 800 volunteers come down from all over the United States. They are coming in around the clock to volunteer. Mm-hmm. We had all these arrangements, places for them to stay, an old Bible college almost right on the border, and we had all that stuff set up. And I rode with Chris Simcox, and I remember riding with him. We're going down to check on where one of our base operations was, and off to the right there's trees and brush, and Border Patrol helicopter comes swooping down and starts to land, and out of the brush it explodes. Yeah, I couldn't see anybody. They were really well hidden. There must have been 15 to 20 young Hispanic men and women just exploded out of the brush. And it reminded me of Vietnam a lot, what I saw there, and these guys coming, jumping out of the helicopter, and Border Patrol people coming in with trucks and stuff, bailing out to arrest these people.
Yeah.
Really something. We also saw remains of people that so many people die on the border, it's never reported.
That is true.
It is very true. And so never discussed, never in the news. When I was there was in the paper, and I think it was Sierra Vista, that this was a couple years later when I was with the American Border Patrol, but a helicopter with Border Patrol helicopter received gunfire from the ground, and they went down to engage, and the spotter on the helicopter took a bullet in the leg, so they had to pull back. That was in the paper in Sierra Vista. It was in the paper in Tucson, but above there,
Nothing covered.
Swept under the rug.
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of thing happens all the time.
Yeah.
There was one night I was there at the ranch, which was owned by Glenn Spencer. I don't know if he's still there now or not, but we were overnight there, me and my son, and there were several ranch hands that were also kind of like special forces type guys in this little militia outfit. and as we could hear, the lights were coming on. Border Patrol would come in right across our property, and they had lights on. There were megaphones on. There was a wall of invasion coming across there, and these people were fleeing, and the Border Patrols. We sat out on the porch with our rifles.
Because you were guarding someone's property, right?
We were on private property. We were watching people running by us and stuff, just in case they tried to enter the house, we would stop them. But otherwise, we didn't get involved. This went on all night long.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Not in the papers.
Not in the papers.
Not in the
Never
papers, right.
reported. Hush, hush.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Awesome. Well, do you have anything else you want to add before I ask the last question?
I think that.
All these
This
great
was a
stories.
question. Yeah,
I'm
so
like,
many great stories. Well, I do want you to say we do have one last question, but if you could, so you wrote a few books.
Yes.
So tell us about the books that you wrote really quick, and then we'll ask you our last question.
The first one I wrote was called Song of the Waterwheel. It's about my she was my third wife, but she was my first wife in Christ. The first two marriages, I was not Christian. And so I met her through her oldest brother, and with whom I'd been friends for a while before I knew he had a sister. And she was gorgeous. She was 5 years younger than me. She had a tumultuous childhood like I had, and I met. It was instantaneous love was when I met her. God showed me where she was at spiritually, and we dated. We were married within a few weeks after we met. It was so red hot. People thought it wouldn't last. We went 28 years. We moved from Seattle area to Arizona in 2002, and in about 2007, she told me she had been diagnosed with cancer, and then from there it was a downhill thing. For 9 months, we watched my kids and I. We had a son and a daughter by her, so I have three kids that way, and she passed away. It was a slow process, very hard. I went into a period of a 2-year stretch of first year was a lot of heavy drinking. My only outlet was horseback riding. I'm a horseman, and then that led to my joining the Maricopa County Sherrif's posse, the mounted posse. It helped me a lot to get grounded again in a structure like that I knew. It was a military, wearing a uniform.
Right.
I took all the training they had. I even trained with a SWAT team to handle school shootings, active school shootings, active shooters situations in the schools, stuff like that. I took all the training they had to give me. I'd had all the training that regular deputies get by the time I've had a year and a half on the posse. I was there 6 years. And then after Christine died, after 2 years, the grief was settling down, and I met this lady, much younger than me, in church, Hispanic girl, and I fell in love with her. We're 24 years apart. It's an awesome marriage.
This book is about your wife that died of cancer,
that's
right?
what this book. So after I was completed with this book, while I was married to Patricia, after we got married, I began to write about my police experiences, but I made it historical fiction.
Okay.
Because to be on the safe side, I'm not so clear on the details anymore.
Yeah.
As time goes by.
Yeah.
So I've got 6 books out, and the 7th one in the works.
And what is that series called?
It's called The Blue Suit Chronicles.
Blue Suit Chronicles.
And I call it Blue Suits because in the FBI back in the 60s and 70s, all cops, whether they're state, federal, or city, were blue suits. So that's where I picked up.
Yeah, I got it from.
I worked with some FBI people when I was in detectives.
So the Song
cool.
of the Waterwheel is about your that story with your wife, and then the Blue Suit Chronicles is the historical fiction about police work
Yes.
from your
So
experience.
awesome.
Yeah, so we were saying it's like you were military, police, private investigator, bounty hunter, sheriff's posse, border patrol. Like you've done every every type of law enforcement pretty much.
Done all the training.
Such an interesting thing. So with that, there was that last question that we wanted to ask you, which we didn't talk about on our pre phone call, but we wanted to get your take on
Yes, we were
something.
because we were wondering what you would tell people and family members who are veterans or first responders, and how we can better help them.
So people, if people have family members that are either veterans or first responders, like what is your advice to them? Because you were talking about how hard it is. It was hard on your marriage. It was hard on.
Yeah, it's we've paid a price that most people don't have to pay. And when you come through the boot camp experience, you're permanently different. You're permanently there's a stamp there that we recognize in each other. It's like I have to say a club, but we're a part of society that is unique to itself, and nobody else can really understand it. Nobody else can belong to it. You have to pay that price. And so I think that if family members understood that, we see things differently. I learned when I had my PI firm and I had to hire people to help me. If I had a guy that had just police experience and he was retired, he might get it done and he might not. If he had had law enforcement or if he had had military, whether or not he'd been in law enforcement, it would get done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an edge there, for better or for worse. I mean, some of the worst people we've had turn bad. We're able to do that because of the military mindset
training,
and the training.
Yeah.
There's maybe it's an overused term, but a laser-like focus that is there on a certain something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I love it. And one thing, just really quick, because we need to wrap this up. But one thing that we didn't mention, but you also did prison ministry, and you said that you had shared your testimony in every prison and jail in Washington. Is that what you said? Your claim to fame?
I've shared my testimony in every prison, federal or state, in Washington State, and also at the prison down here in Florence, just once. I was in the jail ministry when I was in law enforcement with a team of guys from neighborhood church. There was about 4 or 5 of us at any one time. We'd go over to the King County Jail on Monday nights and put on a church service there and lead guys to Christ. Sometimes they would rotate back through after a few months. But we also, the same guys, we went down to, this is really dangerous, we went down to the Seattle waterfront at night, and we would interrupt and drug deals or share Christ with prostitutes, male or female prostitutes, drifters, and that kind of thing. We had a coordinated agreement with Bread of Life Mission and the Union Gospel Mission to send people Christ, we could give them some place to go for follow-up and that type of stuff. So we did that. I've done street witnessing like that.
Well, and I think we've lost that a lot. Sam and I were talking about it. Her generation and even really mine to a certain extent haven't really seen combat and haven't lived that. So I think it's important to, like, one of the things I kind of want to end with this, but that I feel like we need to be able to hear these stories, right? So stories from people who have lived through a lot of that stuff, because we've never, Sam was saying her generation, she's in her 20s, has never really seen combat. We had 9/11, but that was right after you were born. And that was, but haven't grown up with that just it was different, right? And so being able to hear these stories of going down and like on the waterfront and some of these things that were happening at the border, and those stories are important. And we lose something if we don't have those conversations with people who are different ages from us, right? So older people talking to younger people and younger people asking questions of older people. I think that's a really important aspect, that generational, I mean, it's biblical for one thing, but to have that where generations are talking to each other and learning some of the lessons that you've seen and you've learned in your 10 lifetimes that we talked about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There people that haven't experienced this can get involved in a different way that is still, you step outside your routine, and that's get involved with outfits like Teen Challenge.
Yeah.
Because I go out to Teen Challenge Ranch out here for men, out in the Newton River. I go out there every Thursday to visit with these guys, to listen to them, share Christ with them, figure out how I can pray for them. We build relationships. These men rotate through. Yeah. I have a heart for broken or lost men. Which is so good. So this is where other people can get involved. I know Dream City Church very involved with
the Dream Center. And there's like outreach on the streets and Teen Challenge and prison ministries. There's all kinds of different ways that those, because again, you're talking about a lot of that redeeming lives that people would write off, right?
This is what Jesus did. Yeah. He got down in the trenches.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Such a great way to end. So we thank you so much for coming and talking to us today, sharing your stories. And I know you have many more, but thank you. And thank you for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify, and follow us on social media to find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.